The battered Nokia phone buzzed against the chipped laminate countertop, its screen flickering to life with a text message. Megan Reed wiped her hands on her waitress apron and glanced at the device, expecting another shift change request from her manager at Riverside Diner. Instead, unfamiliar words lit up the screen. Blind date tomorrow, 8 p.m. Lorenzo's on 5th Avenue. Wear something nice. Someone wants to meet you. Megan's brows furrowed as she read the message again. Lorenzo's was one of those upscale restaurants where patrons needed reservations months in advance, where a single appetizer cost more than what she made in tips during a double shift. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and typed back, "Wrong number?" The response came instantly. "No mistake. This is Jessica from college. Remember me. Business class. Sophomore year. Trust me, you'll want to be there. Jessica Taylor." Megan remembered her all too well. The perfectly manicured socialite who'd made Megan's 2 years at Westlake University a living nightmare before she'd had to drop out when her mother got sick. The same Jessica who'd once accidentally spilled coffee all over Megan's only professional outfit before a crucial presentation. The same Jessica who'd started the rumor that Megan was only there on a charity scholarship. "Everything okay, Meg?" asked Darla, the 60-something waitress who'd taken Megan under her wing 3 years ago when she'd first started at the diner. "Yeah, just weird blast from the past," Megan replied, slipping the phone into her pocket. "Your past or someone else's?" Darla chuckled, balancing 4 plates along her arms, with the expertise that came from decades in the service industry. Megan grabbed the coffee pot for refills at her station. "Remember that girl I told you about? From college, Jessica?" Darla's expression soured. "The rich witch. What's she want?" "Apparently to set me up on a blind date at Lorenzo's." "Lorenzo's?" Darla whistled low. "Honey, that place is so fancy they iron their napkins twice." Later that night, in her tiny studio apartment that doubled as her bedroom, living room, and sometimes her workspace for the online transcription jobs she took when bills piled too high, Megan stared at the text message again. Common sense told her to delete it and move on. Nothing good could come from reconnecting with Jessica Taylor. Yet something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or that stubborn streak her mother always said would either make her great or get her into trouble, made her fingers hover over the keyboard. "Why me? Why now?" she typed. 3 dots pulsed on screen, then, "Because you deserve a break. And he's hot, rich, and looking for someone different. Interested?" Megan snorted. Different was Jessica code for beneath his social standing. Still, her eyes drifted to the stack of medical bills on her small IKEA desk. Her mother's cancer was in remission, but the financial aftermath remained devastating. A free dinner at Lorenzo's, even as someone's charity case, meant she could put that money toward the electricity bill instead. "Fine, but I'm leaving if anything feels off." After her shift the next day, Megan stood in front of her modest closet, anxiety mounting. The nicest thing she owned was a simple black dress she'd found at a thrift store for her mother's last doctor's appointment when they'd received the good news about the remission. It wasn't Lorenzo's worthy, but it was clean, fit well, and with her grandmother's simple pearl pendant, she thought she could at least avoid looking completely out of place. When she arrived at the restaurant, heart hammering against her ribs, the maître d' looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. I'm meeting someone," Megan said, trying to keep her voice steady. "A reservation under Jessica Taylor, maybe?" The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ah, yes, the Jackson party. Please, follow me." Megan's stomach twisted into knots as she was led through the dimly lit restaurant, past tables of people wearing jewelry that cost more than her annual rent. She felt eyes on her, pitying, curious, judging, and she fought the urge to turn and flee. The maître d' stopped at a private alcove near the back of the restaurant. "Your party is expecting you," he said with a slight bow, then disappeared. Sitting alone at the table, focused intently on his phone, was a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine cover. Dark hair styled to perfection, a jawline that could cut glass, and a tailored suit that probably cost more than Megan's car. When he looked up, deep blue eyes locked with hers, and for a fleeting moment something like recognition flickered across his face. "You must be Megan," he said, his voice deeper than she'd expected, as he stood and extended his hand. "I'm Jack Harrington, Jack Harrington." Even Megan, disconnected as she was from the world of business and finance, knew that name. CEO of Harrington Innovations, the tech company that had revolutionized sustainable energy storage. His face occasionally graced the business sections she skimmed, while customers lingered over coffee at the diner. "Nice to meet you," she managed, her voice small as she slid into the chair he pulled out for her. "I'm sorry if I kept you waiting." "Not at all," he replied, studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "I'd just arrived myself." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when the waiter appeared with water and wine menus. Megan noticed Jack hadn't stopped watching her, his brow slightly furrowed as though trying to solve a puzzle. "So," he finally said, "how do you know Jessica?" "College," Megan answered simply, not wanting to dive into their complicated history. "We had some classes together before I had to leave. How about you?" "Her husband is my CFO," Jack replied. "When she mentioned setting me up with someone, I was skeptical, but—" He trailed off, still studying her face. Megan shifted uncomfortably. "But what?" "You're not what I expected," he admitted, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I bet," Megan muttered, before she could stop herself. When his eyebrows raised, she flushed. "Sorry. It's just Jessica and I weren't exactly friends." Understanding dawned on Jack's face. "Ah, one of those setups." Before Megan could respond, her phone buzzed. Under the table, she glanced at the screen to see a message from Jessica. "Surprise. Hope you don't mind being tonight's entertainment. The girls and I have a bet on how long before he makes an excuse to leave. Don't embarrass yourself too much." Attached was a selfie of Jessica and 3 other women Megan vaguely recognized from college, all dolled up and clearly at a bar nearby, champagne glasses raised in mocking salute. Megan's blood ran cold, then hot with humiliation. This wasn't a blind date. It was a setup to be humiliated, with a front-row audience waiting for the disaster to unfold. She looked up to find Jack watching her, his expression unreadable. "I should go," she said quietly, gathering her small purse and rising from the table. This was a mistake. "Wait," Jack said, his hand reaching for hers but stopping short of making contact. "What happened? What did I say?" Megan hesitated, torn between fleeing and explaining. Something in his eyes, genuine confusion perhaps, made her decide on honesty. She handed him her phone with Jessica's message still displayed. As he read it, his expression darkened, jaw clenching visibly. When he looked up, his eyes held something Megan hadn't expected. Anger, yes, but not directed at her. And beneath that, something that looked strangely like determination. "Please, sit down," he said softly. "Don't give them what they want." "Which is what? To watch the poor girl fumble through a dinner she can't afford with a man so far out of her league, he's practically in another dimension?" Jack's lips quirked up in an unexpected smile. "Actually, I was thinking we could give them a show they never anticipated." "What exactly did you have in mind?" Megan asked, slowly lowering herself back into the chair, her heart still racing from the revelation of Jessica's cruel prank. Jack leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "First, we enjoy an excellent dinner on my account. Second, we make sure they see us having a genuinely good time. And third," his eyes sparkled with mischief, "we leave them wondering what just happened." Despite herself, Megan felt a smile tugging at her lips. "I'm not much of an actress." "No acting required," Jack replied, his gaze steady on hers. "Just be yourself." "That's already confounding their expectations, isn't it?" The waiter appeared at their table, and Jack ordered a bottle of wine without consulting the menu. When Megan tried to demur, explaining she rarely drank, he simply asked for a selection of non-alcoholic options as well. The ease with which he navigated the interaction, confident but not arrogant, polite but not deferential, spoke of someone accustomed to moving through the world on his own terms. "So, Megan Reed," Jack said once they were alone again, "tell me about yourself. The real story, not whatever Jessica might have told you to say." Megan hesitated. "There's not much to tell. I work at Riverside Diner. I do transcription work on the side. I live in a studio apartment in Westbrook, not the good part. Nothing that would interest someone like you." "Someone like me," Jack repeated, his expression unreadable. "And what kind of person am I, exactly?" The question caught her off guard. "I didn't mean—" "No, I'm genuinely curious," he insisted, though his tone remained gentle. "What assumptions have you made about me in the 20 minutes we've known each other?" Megan felt heat rise to her cheeks. Rich, privileged, probably Ivy League, used to getting what you want, surrounded by people who say yes to everything, Dating models or socialites or whoever's on the cover of fashion magazines this month. Jack's lips quirked up. Some fair points. Yale for undergrad, Stanford for my MBA, and yes, I've had advantages others haven't. But the rest, he shrugged. People assume a lot about my life that isn't true. Like what? Megan challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. Like that I enjoy the dating scene, or that I find those magazine cover models interesting conversation partners. He took a sip of water. My last 3 relationships ended the same way. They wanted the CEO, not the person. They wanted the lifestyle, the connections, the social media opportunities. Nobody sees past the bank account to the actual human. Megan raised an eyebrow. You'll forgive me if I don't weep for the dating difficulties of billionaires. To her surprise, Jack threw back his head and laughed, a genuine sound that drew glances from nearby tables. Fair enough. But loneliness feels the same regardless of your tax bracket. There was something disarming about his candor that made Megan relax slightly. So what's your story then? The real one. Born in Chicago to second-generation immigrants, my father worked 3 jobs to put my sister and me through good schools. Started coding when I was 11. Developed my first app at 16, got lucky with some investments after college. Started Harrington Innovations 6 years ago because I genuinely believed, still believe, that sustainable energy storage is the key to combating climate change. And the billions? Just a happy accident? Megan couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Money was never the goal, Jack said, his expression serious now. Solving problems is. The money just happened along the way. He paused as the waiter returned with their drinks. What about you? What's your story? Megan considered deflecting but decided on honesty. Single mum raised me after my dad left when I was 4. She worked cleaning houses and doing night shifts at a nursing home to keep us afloat. Got into Westlake on a partial scholarship, worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. Then she got sick, breast cancer, and I had to drop out to care for her. That was 3 years ago. How is she now? In remission, thank God. But the medical bills? Megan shook her head. Let's just say I'll be working double shifts for the foreseeable future. Jack's expression softened. That couldn't have been easy. Putting your dreams on hold like that. It wasn't a choice, Megan said simply. She's my mum. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of appetizers, dishes Megan hadn't ordered and couldn't pronounce. Jack explained each one with enthusiasm, but without condescension, encouraging her to try flavors she'd never experienced. To her surprise, Megan found herself relaxing, the initial tension melting away as they talked. Their conversation flowed more naturally now, jumping from favorite books. They discovered a shared love for historical fiction, to childhood memories, his family's Sunday dinner traditions, her mother's inventive bedtime stories when they couldn't afford books, to dreams deferred, his secret desire to teach, her abandoned plans to become an accountant. Halfway through the main course, a melt-in-your-mouth steak for Jack and seafood linguine for Megan. She caught sight of a flash of blonde hair and designer dress at the bar across the restaurant. Jessica and her friends had arrived to witness what they assumed would be Megan's humiliation. Instead, they found her deep in conversation with Jack, both of them leaning toward each other, laughing occasionally, completely absorbed. Your audience has arrived, Megan murmured, nodding discreetly toward the bar. Jack didn't turn to look. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on Megan's face. Let them watch, he said quietly. Then, with deliberate casualness, he reached across the table and took her hand in his. The simple contact sent an unexpected jolt through Megan's system. His hand was warm, slightly calloused, not the soft hands she'd expected from someone who spent his days in boardrooms. She knew this touch was for show, part of their impromptu performance, but her racing pulse didn't seem to have gotten the memo. You know what's strange? Jack said, his thumb absently tracing patterns on her palm. I feel like I've met you before. There's something familiar about you that I can't quite place. Megan shook her head. Impossible. I think I'd remember meeting Jack Harrington. No, I'm serious, he insisted. It's been bothering me all evening. Have you ever been to the Tech for Tomorrow conference? Or maybe the Sustainability Summit in Seattle last year? On a waitress's salary? Hardly, Megan laughed. The farthest I've traveled in the last 3 years was to Portland for my cousin's wedding, and I had to pick up extra shifts for 2 months to afford that. Jack frowned, the puzzle clearly still bothering him. I never forget a face, especially not one like yours. One like mine? Megan echoed, suddenly self-conscious. Expressive, honest. His eyes met hers. Beautiful. Megan felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked down at their still joined hands. Now who's acting for our audience? I'm not, Jack said quietly, and something in his tone made her look up. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Method acting, remember? Being ourselves. Before Megan could respond, a commotion at the front of the restaurant drew their attention. A woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed but clearly agitated, was arguing with the maitre d'. Even from a distance, Megan could see the family resemblance. The same dark hair, the same determined set of the jaw. "That's my mother," Jack said, his expression shifting to one of concern as he released Megan's hand and stood. "Excuse me for a moment." Megan watched as he crossed the restaurant, speaking briefly to his mother before leading her toward their table. As they approached, Megan could see the older woman's face more clearly, beautiful with the kind of bone structure that aged gracefully, but pinched with worry. "Jack, you haven't been answering your phone," the woman was saying. "I've been trying to reach you all evening. It's about the Thompson deal." She stopped abruptly when she noticed Megan, her perfectly penciled eyebrows rising in surprise. "Mom, this is Megan Reed," Jack said, his hand resting lightly on his mother's elbow. "Megan, my mother, Eleanor Harrington. It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Harrington," Megan said, rising to shake the woman's hand. Eleanor Harrington stared at Megan with undisguised astonishment, her eyes widening. "My God," she whispered. "It's uncanny." "What is?" Jack asked, confusion evident in his voice. Eleanor looked from Megan to her son and back again. "She looks exactly like Catherine. Don't you see it?" Jack's face drained of color as he turned to study Megan with new eyes. The puzzlement that had lingered on his face all evening suddenly gave way to shock. "Who's Catherine?" Megan asked, a strange uneasiness settling in her stomach. "Catherine was my late wife," Jack said quietly. "She died 5 years ago." Silence fell over the table like a heavy curtain. Megan sat frozen, the words echoing in her mind. "Catherine was my late wife." The restaurant's ambient noise, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, soft music, seemed to fade into the background as she processed this revelation. "I'm so sorry," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea you were widowed," Jack finished for her, his expression unreadable. "It's not something that comes up in casual conversation." Eleanor Harrington glanced between them, clearly realizing she had caused discomfort. "I've interrupted your evening. Perhaps I should—" "No, please join us," Megan said quickly, gesturing to the empty chair. "Your son and I were just getting to know each other." She attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, though apparently there's still a lot to learn. Eleanor hesitated, then took the offered seat. "The resemblance is remarkable, though now that I look more closely, it's mostly around the eyes and smile. Catherine's hair was darker and she was taller." "Mom," Jack said, a warning in his tone. "It's all right," Megan assured him, curiosity overcoming her initial shock. "I'd like to know more about her, if that's okay." Jack's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. A short, sharp movement. "Catherine was a marine biologist. We met at a climate conference in Vancouver, where she was presenting research on ocean acidification. Married for 3 years before she was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia." His voice remained steady, but Megan noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped his water glass. "She was gone 8 months later." "I'm so sorry," Megan said again, feeling the inadequacy of the words. "Jack rarely dates," Eleanor added, her gaze still moving curiously between them. "Which makes tonight quite intriguing." "This isn't," Jack began. "It's not exactly a conventional date," Megan cut in, then briefly explained Jessica's prank and their improvised response. Eleanor's expression hardened. Jessica Taylor, Vernon's wife, that vapid social climbing— She caught herself, straightening the napkin in her lap. Well, how disappointing to see grown women behaving like mean-spirited teenagers. "Speaking of whom," Jack murmured, his gaze shifting toward the bar area. Megan turned discreetly to see Jessica and her friends watching their table with naked curiosity. The addition of Eleanor Harrington had clearly thrown a wrench in their expectations for the evening. "The Thompson deal," Jack said, smoothly changing subjects as he turned back to his mother. "What's happened?" "They're backing out," Eleanor said, lowering her voice. "Vernon called an hour ago. Apparently they've received a more attractive offer from Meridian Tech." Jack's expression darkened. "Meridian doesn't have the technology to deliver what Thompson needs. This is about price, not capability." It's about relationships, Eleanor corrected gently. Mitchell Thompson and Robert Meridian were roommates at Princeton. Old connections matter in this business. Old connections shouldn't matter more than actual solutions, Jack countered, frustration edging his voice. Megan, feeling increasingly out of place in this discussion of million-dollar deals and corporate rivalries, began to withdraw into herself. The evening had taken such unexpected turns, from humiliation to connection to this strange, uncomfortable territory where she was both physically present and completely irrelevant. "I should go," she said quietly, reaching for her purse. "You two clearly have business to discuss, and I've taken up enough of your evening." "Nonsense," Eleanor said immediately. "We've been terribly rude, discussing business at the dinner table. Jack knows better." She gave her son a pointed look. "My mother's right," Jack agreed, his expression softening as he turned back to Megan. "Please stay. I'm sorry for the interruption." Megan hesitated, torn between the growing discomfort of feeling out of place and the surprising realization that she didn't want the evening to end. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed with a text message. "Having fun playing pretend Princess Meg. Don't forget to be home by midnight before your designer dress turns back into rags." "Oh wait, it already is rags." Jessica anger flared hot and unexpected in Megan's chest. She was tired of being Jessica Taylor's punching bag, tired of feeling small and insignificant, tired of apologizing for her existence in spaces where people like Jessica thought she didn't belong. "Actually," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I think I will stay." Jack smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "Good." Eleanor watched this exchange with keen interest. "So, Megan, Jack mentioned you attended Westlake University. What did you study there?" "Accounting with a minor in business administration," Megan replied. "I had to leave during my junior year when my mother got sick." "Accounting?" Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "How practical. And what are your plans now that your mother is in remission? Will you return to finish your degree?" The question hit a sore spot. Megan had asked herself the same thing countless times, lying awake at night in her tiny apartment, dreaming of a different life. "I'd like to someday, but the financial reality is complicated." "Scholarships," Eleanor pressed. "Mom," Jack interjected, "let's not interrogate Megan about her life plans over dinner." "It's a reasonable question," Eleanor countered. "Education is the foundation of opportunity. Surely a bright young woman like Megan has considered her options." "Of course I have," Megan said, a edge creeping into her voice. "I've considered community college night classes while working days. I've considered online programs with payment plans. I've considered educational loans that would take 20 years to repay. What I haven't considered is a magical solution that would allow me to walk away from my responsibilities and focus solely on my education." A tense silence fell over the table. Megan immediately regretted her sharp tone. "I'm sorry, that was rude. It's just a sensitive subject." To her surprise, Eleanor smiled, a slow, approving expression. "No need to apologize for speaking honestly. I respect directness." She turned to Jack. "She has spine. I like that." The rest of the dinner passed in a strange blend of awkward moments and unexpected connections. Eleanor shared stories of Jack's childhood, his failed attempts at building a hovercraft at 12, his disastrous first investor pitch at 19, that had him groaning in good-natured embarrassment, and Megan laughing despite herself. Jack, in turn, asked thoughtful questions about Megan's life, listening intently to her answers as though they contained vital information. By the time dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate creation that Megan couldn't have afforded in a month of tips, she had almost forgotten the circumstances that had brought her there. Almost, but not quite. Each time she caught sight of Jessica at the bar, a cold reminder of reality slipped between her ribs. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, rising gracefully after checking her phone. "I need to make a call." "Jack, perhaps you could show Megan the garden terrace while I handle this." Before either could respond, she had glided away, leaving them alone again. "Garden terrace?" Megan asked. "Through those doors," Jack indicated with a nod. "It's beautiful at night. My mother, subtle as always, is giving us privacy." "For our performance?" Megan asked, nodding toward Jessica and her friends, who were now watching them with naked curiosity. "Is that all this is to you?" Jack asked, his voice suddenly serious. "A performance?" The question caught Megan off guard. I don't know what this is," she admitted. "A few hours ago I thought I was walking into a cruel joke. Now I'm having dinner with you and your mother, talking about your late wife, who I apparently resemble, and pretending I belong in a world where people casually discuss multi-million-dollar business deals over dessert. Jack studied her face for a long moment. You belong wherever you decide to belong, Megan Reed. The intensity of his gaze made her heart flutter traitorously. The garden terrace sounds nice, she said, needing a moment to gather her composure. Jack led her through the ornate doors to a secluded terrace overlooking a meticulously maintained garden. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and the night air carried the scent of jasmine. They stood side by side at the stone balustrade, looking out at the twinkling city lights beyond. I should tell you something, Jack said after a moment of companionable silence. When my mother mentioned Catherine, she wasn't entirely wrong about the resemblance. It's not so much physical, though there are similarities. It's something else, a quality, a way of being in the world, direct, uncompromising, real. Megan didn't know how to respond. She felt suddenly unmoored, caught between the reality of who she was, a struggling waitress with mountains of debt and deferred dreams, and the fantasy of this evening, this moment, this man, looking at her as though she were someone remarkable. Jack, she began, unsure what she even wanted to say. Before she could continue, the terrace doors burst open. Jessica Taylor stood there, her perfect makeup unable to hide the flush of alcohol and anger on her face. Well, isn't this cozy? She said, her words slightly slurred. Megan Reed playing Cinderella for the night. Tell me, Jack, has she told you about her trailer park upbringing, or how she worked as a cleaning lady to make ends meet in college? Did she mention the fact that she couldn't even complete her degree? Jack stiffened beside Megan, but before he could respond, Jessica continued, her voice dripping with malice. He's only entertaining you because you look like his dead wife. It's pathetic, really. Him playing pretend with the help, and you thinking someone like him could ever seriously be interested in someone like you. The night air seemed to crystallize around them, Jessica's cruel words hanging in the space between. Megan felt as though she'd been slapped, the sting of humiliation heating her cheeks. The magical quality of the evening shattered like fine crystal dropped on marble. Jack took a step forward, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. You need to leave now. Jessica laughed, the sound brittle and mean. Oh, come on, Jack, don't tell me you're actually falling for this act. She's nobody, a charity case playing dress-up in a world she doesn't belong in. The only person who doesn't belong here is you, a cool voice interrupted. Eleanor Harrington stood in the doorway, her elegant figure silhouetted against the warm light from the restaurant. And I believe my son asked you to leave. Jessica's confidence faltered momentarily before she rallied. Mrs. Harrington, I was just explaining to Jack that you arranged this evening as some sort of cruel practical joke, Eleanor finished for her. Yes, Megan explained the situation. What I find fascinating is that you believed such juvenile behavior would impress anyone, least of all my son. It was just a bit of fun, Jessica said, her voice smaller now. I see nothing amusing about humiliating another person for your entertainment, Eleanor replied. She turned to Megan, whose face had drained of color. Are you all right, my dear? Megan nodded stiffly, though she felt anything but all right. The beautiful bubble of the evening had burst, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Jessica's words had struck their target with precision, giving voice to the very doubts Megan had been fighting all night. She was indeed nobody special. Just a waitress with too much debt and too many responsibilities. The resemblance to Jack's late wife explained his interest, which had seemed too good to be true because it was. I should go, Megan said quietly. Thank you for dinner. Megan, wait, Jack began, but she was already moving past him, past Jessica's smug expression, past Eleanor's concerned gaze. She hurried through the restaurant, eyes fixed firmly ahead to avoid seeing the curious looks of other diners. Outside, the cool night air hit her flushed face as she fumbled for her phone to call a rideshare app. Her hands trembled slightly as she tapped the screen. Megan! Jack's voice called from behind her. She turned to see him striding toward her, determination etched in every line of his face. Please don't leave like this. Why not? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Jessica was right about one thing. I don't belong in your world, Jack. Tonight was wonderful. More than wonderful, but it wasn't real. It felt real to me, he said quietly. Megan shook her head. You were kind to me because I remind you of Catherine. That's understandable, but it's not a foundation for anything. Is that what you think? That I've spent the evening with you because you vaguely resemble someone from my past? He took a step closer. Megan, I was drawn to you before my mother ever mentioned Catherine. From the moment you walked into that restaurant, nervous but determined, out of your comfort zone but refusing to show it, I was intrigued by you. You don't even know me, Megan protested. I know that you dropped everything to care for your mother when she got sick. I know you work harder than anyone should have to stay afloat. I know you're smart and funny and direct in a world full of people who hide behind social niceties and false personas. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. And I know that meeting you tonight feels like finding something I didn't even realize I was missing. Megan felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. This doesn't happen to people like me, Jack. Cinderella stories are for fairy tales, not for waitresses from Westbrook with medical debt and an associate's degree. Maybe it doesn't usually happen, he acknowledged, but it's happening now, unless you walk away. The sound of heels clicking on pavement interrupted the moment. Eleanor approached them, looking remarkably unruffled despite the scene that had just unfolded. That unpleasant young woman and her friends have been escorted out, she announced. Megan, I hope you're not leaving on their account. It's not that, Megan said, gently extracting her hand from Jack's. It's just time for me to go back to reality. Reality, Eleanor repeated thoughtfully. An interesting concept. Tell me, what part of tonight wasn't real to you? The question caught Megan off guard. All of it. The restaurant, the conversation, the connection. It was all a beautiful fantasy that I got to borrow for a few hours. Eleanor studied her with shrewd eyes. The restaurant exists. The conversations happened. As for the connection, she glanced at her son. That seems quite real to me. Mum, Jack said quietly, could you give us a minute? Eleanor nodded, touching Megan's arm lightly before moving away. Whatever you decide, Megan, it was a pleasure meeting you. Once they were alone again, Jack took a deep breath. I have a proposition for you. Megan raised an eyebrow. A proposition? Not that kind, he clarified quickly. A business proposition. I'm listening. Harrington Innovations has an educational initiative for employees, full tuition coverage for degree completion or advanced degrees. We also have an accounting department that could use someone with your background and work ethic. He held up a hand when she started to protest. This isn't charity, Megan. It's an investment. You'd work while finishing your degree, full salary, benefits, flexible hours around your classes. Megan stared at him in disbelief. You're offering me a job just like that? You haven't even seen my resume. I've seen enough, Jack replied simply. But if it makes you feel better, you can send me your resume tomorrow, and we'll do a formal interview with HR next week. Why would you do this for me? Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I recognize potential when I see it. Because everyone deserves a chance to fulfill their dreams. Because the world is better when bright, capable people like you aren't held back by circumstances beyond their control. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. And yes, if we're being completely honest, because I find myself wanting to know you better. And this gives me that opportunity. Megan felt dizzy with possibility. I don't know what to say. Say yes to the job, Jack suggested. As for the rest, dinner, conversation, getting to know each other, we can take that one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. A car pulled up to the curb. Megan's rideshare had arrived. The moment of decision was upon her. I need to think about it, she said finally. Something like disappointment flickered across Jack's face, but he nodded. Of course. Here's my card. My personal number is on the back. Call me when you decide. Megan took the card, her fingers brushing against his in the process. Thank you. For everything. Thank you for not running when Jessica sent that text, he replied with a small smile. It would have been a very different evening. As Megan slid into the back seat of the car, she caught a final glimpse of Jack standing on the sidewalk, watching her leave. The driver pulled away from the curb and she leaned back against the headrest, her mind whirling with everything that had happened. Back in her tiny apartment, Megan kicked off her shoes and sat cross-legged on her bed, Jack's business card in her hand. The events of the evening played through her mind on repeat, the initial shock and humiliation, the unexpected connection with Jack, Eleanor's surprising warmth, Jessica's cruel interruption, and finally Jack's proposition. Was it too good to be true? Probably. Was it a risk? Definitely. Her gaze drifted to the small corkboard on her wall, where she'd pinned her goals years ago. Finish degree, get accounting job, help mum, move to better apartment, start saving for the future. dreams that had seemed increasingly unreachable with each passing year. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She expected it to be Darla checking in, but instead, Jack's name appeared on the screen. No pressure, but I hope you'll say yes, not just to the job. A warmth spread through Megan's chest. Hope, tentative but persistent. Before she could overthink it, she dialed the number on the card. Jack answered on the first ring. That was fast. I've spent 3 years putting my life on hold, Megan said, surprising herself with her certainty. I don't want to waste any more time. Is that a yes? She could hear the smile in his voice. To the job. Yes, though I insist on that formal interview. I want to earn this on my own merits. And to the rest? Jack asked, his voice softening. Megan took a deep breath. That's a yes too, one day at a time, like you said. How about we start tomorrow? Lunch at a place of your choosing, some place that matters to you, not another fancy restaurant. I know just the place, Megan replied, thinking of Riverside Diner, where Darla would undoubtedly subject Jack to a thorough interrogation. It's a date, Jack said. After they hung up, Megan sat in the quiet of her small apartment, Jack's business card still in her hand. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. One cruel prank, designed to humiliate her, had somehow opened the door to possibilities she'd stopped allowing herself to imagine. 6 months later, Megan stood in the Harrington Innovations lobby, a framed accounting degree in her hands, and a small crowd of colleagues gathered to celebrate her graduation. She'd moved into a better apartment, helped her mother start a small home business, and paid off the last of the medical bills. More importantly, she'd found her footing in a world she once thought was closed to her. Jack appeared by her side, pride evident in his expression, as he slipped an arm around her waist. Congratulations, Ms. Reed, youngest team leader in the department's history. Thank you, Mr. Harrington, she replied with a teasing smile. Later that evening, as they walked along the riverfront, Jack stopped suddenly and turned to face her. You know, when we met, Jessica thought she was playing a cruel joke. Instead, she accidentally introduced me to the love of my life. Quite the plot twist, Megan agreed, her heart swelling with happiness. Speaking of plot twists, Jack said, suddenly dropping to one knee and pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Megan Reed, you walked into my life by accident, but staying with you is the most deliberate choice I'll ever make. Will you marry me? Megan's hands flew to her mouth, tears of joy springing to her eyes. Yes, she whispered, absolutely yes. As Jack slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his embrace, Megan thought about the night that had changed everything, how a cruel joke had transformed into the greatest gift of her life. Sometimes, she realized, fairy tales did happen in real life. Sometimes Cinderella got to stay at the ball after midnight. Sometimes the ending was even happier than anyone could have imagined.